Okay, picking up where we left off, we're in the middle of doing our midterm review. I'm on question number 28, which is the one that's on Chapter 4, page 148 on interviews. So again, I'm probably going to ask you some high-level things like, what are some lessons learned kind of scenarios that you could use to, make interviews go better? The book's got some pretty cool things in there, and I added a few little odds and ends that I thought were appropriate. If you can remember those, you'll be good to go. Observations. Again, I mentioned that some scenarios, observations work a little better. I'll probably ask you something like, which of the following are true of observations? Boom, 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 boom. Next one is on surveys. And again, it's kind of a philosophical question, something along the lines of, the skill level required to put together a survey or a questionnaire. Microsoft Visio. I kind of waxed philosophically a bit about some changes to Microsoft Visio, and I'm going to ask you something specific about that. This was not in the book at all. Okay. Next one is I'm going to ask you a question that kind of demonstrates that you really do understand the difference between a physical and a logical model. I might ask you to define those terms, but it'll probably be a two-part question. It'll be, what is physical and logical models, but then I'll follow it up with a part 2 and ask you something like, and why would you use one versus the other, or what scenario is best for that, something along that. So I may ask you to define the terms, but there'll probably be something else following along, a two-part. Black box. That's a term that's basically used when talking about those processes and why is it called that. And so again, it's kind of sort of a definition term, but more along the lines of, give me a scenario why this term makes sense, kind of a thing. The next one talks about the data flow diagram rules, and there was a whole couple of pages on, this can't talk directly to that, and this can't do that. I'm going to ask you something along the lines of, which of the following are true of DFD rules, and list them all. You can go through and go, so yes, yes, no, no, yes, no. Go through and get them all. Context diagrams. I'm going to ask you something about, like, what's the difference between a context diagram and a level 0 diagram of a data flow diagram. So again, not definition of terms, but like, what's the difference? Leveling and balancing. Again, I don't really want you to define the terms. I'm probably going to ask you which one does what, or why would I do this, or something that demonstrates that you understand what those terms are for and why they're used. Data dictionary. I talked a bit about how data dictionary in the context of the book is pretty cool, but there's also some additional context that I added in lecture that talks about how, some companies even have a person, a data repository person, whose sole job it is to keep up a corporate data dictionary. Well, if you can remember that part of the lecture, you'll be in good shape. Alrighty. Modular design. There's going to be some kind of a philosophical question about, once we get into like the structured English and the different types of techniques like the decision trees and all that. I'm probably going to ask you something about that first part of that paragraph regarding the modular design. And then we are going to get into decision table versus decision tree. I'll probably ask you something along the lines of, which of the following are true? And then list them. Boom, 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 boom. Again, I'm not asking for a definition of terms, although you probably have to know the definitions. But I'm going to ask you kind of like, why I would use one versus the other, or this is appropriate, or this is preferred, or something like that. Okay, let's see. The next one is that 4-model approach. Actually, it's a pretty decent section in the book. It's only about 4 or 5 sentences, but it basically talks about how If you have an existing system, you might have to start kind of reverse engineering. You start with a physical model and produce a logical model, then produce another logical model for the new guy and a new physical model for the new guy, and you end up with 4 models. And how sometimes you get some pushback from vendors who basically say, you know, why are you bothering to document something that we're going to throw away? And so I'm going to ask you something regarding that kind of thinking. Okay. The overall object-oriented philosophy. This I probably carried on for 5 minutes, giving you my philosophy of life regarding object-oriented, particularly object-oriented programming, and basically the essence of what it's for. I rattled off a handful of things. I summarized it at the end with 3 salient points about, you know, here's why, here's what the benefits are, here's what the benefits are if you're a company versus just a hobbyist. So if you can halfway remember that, you'd be in pretty good shape. Practically none of that detail is in the book. Okay, next one talks about the class versus object. Again, the book does not use the same terms that I use. I make a complete distinction between a class and an instance of a class. Now, the book does not, but this is my test, my course, and I'm asking the question in the context of what I put in lecture. So, you might say, oh, well, I'm going to find the answer there on page 226. No. Page 226 is to provide you context for the question, not where the answer is, because probably the answer is not going to be in the book on any page. It's just to provide you context for the question. Okay, objects. In this case, I'm kind of kowtowing to their terminology, so you'll be able to find that spot in the book. Again, I wouldn't, whatever. Okay, objects. So I'm going to ask you, UML object, which of the following are true? Boom, 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 boom. And so you just have to be able to rattle off some of the things that you think are appropriate for objects. Likewise, for the next ones on attributes and methods, it's going to be, which of the following are true of attributes? And boom, 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 boom. Attributes of objects. The next one is about methods. I'll probably ask you something about, is there sort of like a naming convention or some sort of a thing that kind of can help you distinguish by just looking? Can you distinguish between a property and a method by just looking at it? That's a cool question. The next one is the messages. If you recall, a car object has an accelerator and a brake function, but you have to provide some sort of input to it. Okay, cardinality. That's one of those goofy terms. And I'm not going to ask you to define cardinality, but I'll probably ask you something about why on earth would I want to put cardinality in my diagram? What's it for? How's that going to help me any? That kind of a question. State transition. I'll probably ask you for a scenario-based question, saying what the heck is it, or is this a good example of, or not? So it could be I'll say, give me a scenario where it's useful, or I'll give you a list of scenarios and you pick which one you think is the most appropriate, something like that. Scenario-based question. Okay, and then the last one is sort of a kind of, a footnote. It is 1 or 2 sentences in the back of the chapter, and it talks about organizing UML charts. And they kind of sort of missed a fundamental thing that I talked about a little bit more in detail in lecture about why that's useful to bother to gather these things together and keep them organized and keep them up to date. There's got to be a reason for it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked the question. Okay, so there we are. Those are the 50 questions that will appear on your test. Again, you're going to only get 40 of them, and which 40, I don't know. What order they're going to be in, I don't know. But, yes, quite a few are from lecture, so you supposedly have taken notes. Nod your head like you did. Oh, yeah, I see you nodding your head. Yes, you took notes during lecture. And yes, about, probably not quite half of these are the short answer type questions. And again, don't write tons and tons of lines. You only got 2 hours to do this, so just Just impress me that you know what the heck you're talking about. That's all you need to do. You don't have to write a bunch of stuff. If you can just give me some key words that let me know, not just keywords, but a sentence with keywords in them, that let me know that you know what the heck's going on. That's it. Okay, so this is a short video because all it's about is doing the test. And good luck, guys. And we'll see you shortly for the next chapter.